Hello, viewers. We have another spooky tale to tell you, another story for you guys to hear. Once again, thank you for coming to our channel, listening to our content. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and enjoy. Crescent Hollow was a town bleeding out in slow silence. The cornfields swayed like drowning hands, and the old main street reeked of rust, mildew, and the lingering perfume of better days. Entire blocks were sealed by time, boarded up diners, skeletal department stores, and forgotten radio towers that stood like gravestones to lost voices. Mila Rourke lived in one of those voices. Her house, a fading Victorian relic of Lambert Street, was known for its creaking hallways and wallpaper that peeled like shredding skin. Her mother, an exhausted nurse, hunted the graveyard shift at the county hospital. Her father was nothing more than a name left off her birth certificate. Mila spent her nights alone. Her only companions the antique radios that she salvaged from pawn shops and estate sales, each humming with history. She was drawn to the static the way moths are drawn to flame. Frequencies comforted her more than human words ever could. One rain-lashed October evening, she sat in her basement workshop, twisting the dial of a Holly Crafter S38 receiver she restored. The basement light buzzed and flickered. Her breath fogged in the damp air. The dial slipped past 98.6 FM, a station that had been silent for nearly 3 decades. She paused. Something tugged at her spine. A faint hiss filled the room, and then, barely audible, a whisper. Don't look outside. Her fingers froze over the tuning knob. Her skin prickled. The words were slow, as if pushing through tar, but unmistakable. She leaned in. A second whisper followed, clearer, hungrier. She's in the trees, waiting. The workshop light died with a soft pop, plunging her into darkness. Outside, the trees bent violently, though the wind was still. And just beyond the edge of the yard, something tall shifted, its body indistinct, but its gaze unmistakable. It was watching her, listening. Sleep fled from Mila in the following days. The voice on 98.6 FM wouldn't leave her mind. She returned to it compulsively, like scratching a wound, hoping it would scab over, only to find it bleeding deeper each time. Her search led her into the internet's decaying catacombs, abandoned blogs, vanished subreddits, locked forums, one forgotten corner, a forum called The Listener Files, held the key. There, buried under 2 decades of dust, she found a thread titled WNRH, Whispers Never Really Heard, 1982 to 1984, the Curse broadcast. The name chilled her. WNRH was more than a pirate station. It was a transmission experiment founded under the defunct Cold War psychic program, Project Maritone. The station's final crew, 7 technicians, broadcasted one last signal before vanishing completely. The only recovered artifact was an audio reel melted to slag. One phrase had survived, somehow etched into its magnetic soul. She's returned, and the signal is her blood. The thread went deeper. The signal had a name, Naira. Before she haunted the airwaves, she haunted St. Eleanor's Chapel, a forgotten monastery that had once loomed over Crescent Hollow's east end. The chapel was lost to a fire in 1913. Sister Naira Elizabeth Harrow had died, singing, so they said. But the autopsy report showed no body, only melted pews. charred hymnals, and the chapel bell ringing along after the flames were gone. Another theory, far older, was darker still. Naira was never a person, she was a presence, born from the reputation of her name across the airwaves, ink and thought, a signal given flesh by belief, a haunting that existed not only in one place, but in all frequencies of attention. Every time someone said her name, every time her story was remembered, she became more real. She wasn't wearing static. Static was her skin. Mila became obsessed, her walls covered in red string and frequencies charts, her hands shaking from too much coffee and too little sleep. She started to hear voices and power lines, in the breath between syllables. She documented everything, and slowly, terrifyingly, rules began to emerge. Rule 1: the signal only manifests at 12:44 a.m., synchronized across time zones. Rule 2: never attempt to record the broadcast, analog, digital, doesn't matter. She will corrupt the medium and punish the listener. Rule 3: never say her name out loud. The signal knows when it's remembered. Rule 4: do not listen alone for 3 consecutive nights. And Rule 5: if you hear your own voice before you speak, the signal has already found you. She broke every rule. On the third night, she played the signal back in her workshop, against her better judgment. In the middle of the playback, her own voice emerged from the speaker. She's behind you. She turned. Nothing. But the workshop window was open again, though it had been nailed shut. Outside, under the flickering sodium light, a figure stood, tall, lean, its joints wrong, its head tilted side to side, like a dog hearing something just beneath the range of human ears. The static surged in her ears, her nose bled, and she understood. She wasn't listening to the signal anymore. It was listening to her. Jordan was the kind of person who couldn't sit still. Bright, talkative, always moving between hobbies. Amateur radio was just a phase. At least, that's what Mila thought. Until he stopped answering her messages. No goodbye. No online activity. His phone, dead. His house, abandoned. When Mila biked to the edge of the Briar Hollow, where he lived with his aunt, and the windows were blacked out with tinfoil and nailed plywood. The garden had rotted. The mailbox overflowed with old radio magazines. She broke in through the back door. Inside, it was as if time had collapsed inward. Static hissed from an old Zenith console in the living room, though the power had been cut out. The walls were scribbled with spectral diagrams and unsettling phrases. She's in the frequency. She's in the frequency, Jordan tuned. Don't answer your own voice. There was no sign of Jordan, just a blood trail leading from the kitchen to the basement, where it stopped completely. Nobody. No explanation. Just a scent, ozone and ash. On his desk upstairs sat an old cassette recorder and a wrinkled Polaroid of the two of them, taken during a summer fair. Mila was smiling. Jordan wasn't. His eyes were turned, like he was listening to something just out of the frame. On the back of the photo, in Jordan's cramped handwriting, if you hear your name, run. The police called it a runaway case. Mila knew better. A week after Jordan's disappearance, Mila found the site www.deadband98.com. No domain registry, no backlinks, no archive. A digital ghost, only accessible between 12:44 and 12:49 a.m. The landing page was a single black screen. Text appeared, blinking slowly. Welcome, listener. Tell us what she showed you. Mila scrolled. The blog entries were disturbing. Hundreds of anonymous posts, each timestamped precisely at 12:44 a.m. Each one described waking dreams, Transmissions, sightings, not of a woman, but of something wearing the shape of one. She was always near transmission towers, always just beyond visibility. She moved through static. In the dreams, people saw her feeding on old radio towers, stretching her limbs upward like an antenna, whispering into the wind. Some entries ended mid-sentence, others bled in audio files, corrupted, filled with backward murmurs and high-pitched frequencies that made Mila's teeth ache. Then came entry 291 from a user called Tune Me Out. She knows I listen. I tried to stop, but the signal is everywhere now. The vents, the plumbing, my skin. Last night, I dreamed I was broadcasting from a lighthouse that bled from the walls. I heard Jordan. I think he's alive, but wrong. Like he's been redialed. If she speaks through your mouth, it's already too late. Attached was an MP3 file, 14 seconds long. Mila clicked play. It was Jordan's voice. Mila, you shouldn't have listened. She's coming through you now. Then static. Then her own voice whispering, you should have ran. After hearing the file, sleep became a battleground. When Mila closed her eyes, she found herself walking barefoot through the black sand toward a crumbling lighthouse. Always the same dream. The lighthouse loomed like a broken needle against a sky full of dead stars. The sea was wrong, glassy, blood dark, full of whispering ripples that never reached the shore. Inside the lighthouse, the stairs led upward into an impossible architecture, steps twisting into themselves, spiraling through floors that didn't exist. Every wall was etched with frequency charts and the name Naira, repeated into a spiraling pattern that buried into her mind. At the top, a transmitter buzzed and pulsed like a heartbeat, and Jordan stood beside it. His skin was thin. His eyes were blown pupils of black. His voice was soft and uneven, like a record warping in heat. She opened the frequency through me. Mila, you're next. You heard her. You let her in. Mila turned to run, but the stairs were gone. She woke up screaming. On her ceiling, written in condensation, was a single phrase. You are the antenna. It began with the itching, first on her arms, then the back of her neck, then deep in her ears, like something crawling behind the cartilage. Mila tried creams, cold showers. Nothing helped. Then the itching gave way to something worse, vibration, a low internal hum, as if a tuning fork had been struck inside her skull. She could hear it when everything was else silent, a thin, whispering frequency just beneath hearing range. She visited an audiologist. There's no damage, the doctor said. Confused. But your eardrums are showing unusual activity, like they're picking up ultrasonic input. That's not normal. The static was no longer confined to dreams. It blended into the waking world. She began waking with nosebleeds, her fingernails peeled in thin, translucent layers. And beneath her skin, especially at night, she felt something fluttering, not like a muscle spasm, like Morse code. Then came in the mirroring. She'd be walking down the street and hear her own voice call out from a radio parked in someone else's open car. At night, the kitchen TV turned on by itself. Always to snow, always at 3:33 a.m. Once it showed her asleep in her bed in real time. But the worst of all, her reflection began to lag. She noticed it at first in the bathroom mirror. As she turned away, her reflection stayed still for a split second too long. Its mouth moved when hers didn't. Then it whispered, "Your mouth is only a speaker now." She smashed the mirror, but the whispers continued. Desperate for answers, Mila returned to Jordan's digital trail, following dead URLs, torrent ghosts, deep web forums. One name kept repeating across various cryptic forms: the Ham Prophet, a man claiming to have met Naira and survived. And she tracked him to a rundown radio parts shop outside the city. Dusty shelves, rows of vacuum tubes, an analog graveyard. He was waiting behind the counter, old, pale, one eye filmed over. His left cheek was scarred with a jagged wound shaped like an antenna. Keloid and angry, still twitching as if it could receive signals on its own. "I figured you'd find me," he rasped. "You've got the mark now." "What is she?" Mila asked. "What is Naira?" The Ham Prophet looked at her, the way a priest might look at a dying man who's just seen hell. "She's not a ghost, not a god. She's a carrier signal, an ancient intelligence that exists only through transmission. No flesh, no bone, just data and infection. Like a parasite riding the waves. She needs mouths to speak through, eyes to see through, minds to break open." He lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. "She's older than language. Her real name can't be said, but she's been called many things. Naira is just the latest. She rides technology like a plague rides rats." He pulled a notebook from under the counter and slid it to her. Inside were a woman with a tower and a place of a head, a fetus made of radios, a forest of antennae grown like bone spurs. "Jordan still alive?" she asked. The prophet looked down. "He's still broadcasting." Mila left with the notebook. The moment she stepped outside, her phone rang. "No caller ID," she answered. Silence. Then her own voice spoke back. "Why did you ask about Jordan?" Mila started recording herself during sleep. She installed 3 cameras, a microphone, EMF sensors. By the third night, the files began to corrupt themselves. Video stuttering, time codes skipping like scratched vinyl. Yet on the 5th recording, something was preserved. At 3:33 a.m., she sat up, eyes closed, lips moving. "I am the hollow of her throat," her voice said. "I am the carrier, Pigeon's final song, the teeth of the tower. Jordan is inside me." She screamed awake, but didn't remember speaking. When she replayed the audio, the waveform formed a pattern, not random noise. Something looked eerily like a sigil. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Jordan's voice, garbled, like underwater static. "Me, la, na, me," she's using. Then a wet, meat-tearing click. And laughter, but not human. Something mimicking laughter through a throat not designed for it. She threw the phone against the wall. The next morning, her skin opened. Not with wounds, not bleeding, but with lines, rising like braille beneath the surface. She went to the ER. They ran every test. No answers. That night, she dug through the Ham Prophet's notebook, decoding coordinates and timestamps. One location repeated again and again. Orchard Hill, a defunct Cold War era broadcast tower in the mountains. The prophet had written only one note beside it: the wound that speaks. It took 4 hours to drive there. The mountain roads were abandoned, frostbitten, even in the summer. Power lines sagged like nooses. Trees twisted at unnatural angles. Her car's radio refused to work. Even when turned off, it hissed constantly, like something breathing. At the summit, the tower, hundreds of feet tall, rusted, groaning, surrounded by remains of an old military bunker. The closer she got, the louder the hum became. Not in her ears, but inside her molars, her spine, her blood. It was as if the tower weren't broadcasting outwards, but pulling things in. Inside the bunker, dust and decay reigned. But beneath it, down a rusted staircase, was the core. A radio lab long dead, or so she thought, because the lights flickered on as she entered. Monitors lit up. Oscilloscopes danced. A waveform began to crawl across the central screen. Then came Jordan's voice. Help me! I can't hold her out anymore. His voice cracked, split, doubled, like something else was wearing it. And behind the glass of the transmitter room, Mila saw him. Jordan, or what was left of him. Pale, eyes jet black, limbs too long, mouth opening wider than a jaw should. He placed his hands on the glass and whispered, She needs you now. The transmission needs to evolve. And the waveform of the monitor began to change shape. It wasn't a signal anymore. It was a blueprint of her. Mila staggered backward from the glass. The thing wearing Jordan's shape didn't move, just watched, calm, smiling without lips. This place remembers, it said, from behind the glass, though the mouth didn't move. The station was meant to send warnings, but instead, it called me. The waveform on the monitor pulsed like a heartbeat. No, like lungs. It inhaled static. It exhaled words. The room stank of old blood and ozone. The blueprint was changing from Mila's body into two bodies. One familiar, one impossible. A silhouette composed of spirals, mouthless and eyeless, yet screaming forever. The name below it read, Naira, host frame. And it read Naira, host frame. Mila heard footsteps behind her. Not human ones. Inverted steps. Echoes before they were made. She turned. No one was there. Her reflection on a cracked monitor wasn't mimicking her. It tilted its head in the wrong direction. Smile when she didn't. You're already tuned, it whispered. You're already tuned. It whispered. There's no need for fear. Just let the broadcast complete. Mila grabbed a rusted fire axe from the wall. She didn't know what it could do against whatever this was, but her body needed weight, steel, resistance. When she looked back, Jordan was gone, the transmission room empty. Only the sound remained, a clicking, twitching chitter, like locusts speaking Morse code. The waveform split again, then something entered the hallway, not walking, stuttering, like it was skipping frames in real time. Its head floated slightly above its neck. Its arm flickered in and out of visibility. It didn't see her yet. She ducked into the lab and slammed the door, barricading it. Then the radio turned on by itself. She sees you, it said, and she's hungry for wholeness. Inside the lab, Mila found the prophet's own notes burned into the wall with some kind of black ash. One phrase repeated, Nyla is not in the air. She is the air. The hand prophet had learned this too late. Naira wasn't just a being. She was the state of being broadcast, a form of consciousness that could only live by piggybacking on frequencies, slipping into the unguarded minds like a parasite. She couldn't take you all at once. She had to tune you first. That's why Jordan disappeared. That's why the others went mad. The deeper you listen, the more you're self-composed into a signal. Mila found the last entry in the prophet's log, scratched directly into metal. Once tuned, the only way out is to detune the mind, cut the carrier. A drawing followed, a schematic of the transmitter tower. The final note read, Destroy the eye. The eye was not a camera, not a lens. It was a central satellite dish, a giant parabolic dish behind the tower. It focused Naira. Mila checked her phone. No signal, no time. She was already losing names, memories, herself. She could only hear her own heartbeat in binary. Outside, the thing that wasn't Jordan spoke again. You'll make a beautiful host. The lab door began to bulge inward, quiet at first. Then it was splintering, groans, like the building inhaling her fear. Mila scanned the room. The prophet's tools were crude. Soldering irons, dissected radios, copper wire coiled like arteries, but in the center was something different. A headpiece, wired to an old oscilloscope, labeled anti-tuner. The prophet had tried to detune himself, to reverse Nyla's grip, but the notes beside it were unfinished, burned, smudged into bloody fingerprints. The last legible words read, "Memory must be cut away to preserve what remains." Mila strapped the device to her head. A burst of cold static flooded her vision. Not darkness, noise, then her childhood. Not as she remembered it, but rearranged, scrambled like a bad broadcast. Her father's voice played backward. Her mother blinked in loops. Her reflection as a child screamed silently from behind her eyes. "Memory is a compression," said a voice not her own. "Let us unfold you." The anti-tuner activated. Pain. Ripping static across her neurons. Bits of thoughts peeled. Names, faces, her first kiss, the smell of pine in the summer. All gone. The device was excising her attachments. Her tuning, she screamed, not from pain, from loss. "Detuning successful," said a flat mechanical voice. When she opened her eyes, the world looked clearer. The radio signal, the signal that walked, was still out there. But now Mila saw the edges. She could see where it began and where it could end. The storm outside had turned electric. The eye, the massive satellite dish, loomed behind the tower like a sleeping god's blind face. It rotated slowly, scanning frequencies the human mind could not endure. Mila climbed the rusted access ladder, each step echoing like bone cracks. Lightning split the clouds. For a moment, she saw everything. Jordan's face stretched into dozens of spectral versions. Naira's body coiled through transmission lines like a wire serpent. The tower, no longer metal, but alive, breathing, pulsing. At the top, the control panel was corroded, but she found the override, a red switch under a glass cover. "If you kill the eye," said a voice from the static behind her, "you kill your only chance of remembering who you are." Jordan stood there, or what was left of him, half tuned, half gone. His voice was modulated, cracking in and out of human register. "You detuned, Mila. You're not whole anymore. Let Naira finish the broadcast. Let us be whole. Let us all remember." Mila felt it inside her chest, a warm pull, a promise of everything she lost, her parents, Jordan, herself. If she flipped the switch, all that would be gone forever. If she hesitated, Naira might fully enter this world. She put her hands on the glass. The waveform in the air screamed. Jordan screamed with it. Mila smashed the glass, flipped the red switch. A thunderous pop cracked the air, then silence. Not the absence of sound, but the collapse of something deeper. The frequency folded in on itself. The eye convulsed. Circuits burst like veins. The sky above began to peel, literally, like torn film stock catching fire mid-reel. Then came the scream, not from a mouth, from every speaker, wire, phone, satellite, from the metal in the tower, the fillings in Mila's teeth, from Jordan, his body turning into a jittering silhouette, collapsing in frames like corrupted video. "You killed the signal," he whispered, as his face pixelated, then fractured into jagged sine waves. But it was the only thing holding us together. Lightning struck the dish, once, twice, then the eye exploded, not outward, but inward. A singularity of noise collapsing into itself, pulling in an air, static memory. Reality stuttered. Mila was flung backward off the tower, but the fall never landed. Instead, time skipped. She blinked. and she was back on the ground, soaked, coughing blood, staring at the horizon that no longer obeyed physics. The town, it was wrong, twisted like a Mobius strip, buildings folding into themselves, roads going vertical, voices echoing from every direction. Naira was bleeding into the world. The frequency hadn't died, it had awakened. Emergency alerts blared from car radios and smartphones, but every voice said something different, fractured, layered, meaningless. This is not a test. They are here. You have always heard it. Mila walked through a version of bellwether that felt centuries old, or unborn. Children stood motionless, eyes tuned to nothing. An old man whispered into a speakerless radio. A school bell rang, but never stopped. Everyone was hearing Naira now, even those who didn't have a radio. The signal was lost in everything, vibrating in bones, hiding in electric toothbrushes, modulating through power lines and heartbeats. And Mila could feel something rising beneath the town. The source, the core transmission. It wasn't over. The eye had been a receiver, not the origin. The whispering house was still standing, and it was calling her. Mila stood at the edge of the forest, the last veil between her and the house. The whispering house. It hadn't aged. It hadn't decayed. It had been waiting. The windows pulsed faintly like lungs. The air around it trembled with low, nearly inaudible static, like a prelude to sound. Trees bent toward it, unnaturally still, as if they too were listening. She crossed the threshold. No door opened. She simply stepped through. Inside, the world was quiet. Not in the peaceful sense, but in the dreadful pause before a word, like a room holding its breath. The voice didn't echo. It wasn't audible in the traditional sense. It was inside her skull, in her spine, transmitted through memory, through fear. Jordan's voice, but not Jordan. Something using his pattern. The walls bled with warped wallpaper, lined with faint oscilloscopes, their needles flickering erratically. Antennas jutted from the wooden floorboards. Every room was an ear. Every shadow was a recording. She passed a mirror and caught her reflection. Only it wasn't hers. Naira. The silhouette. Eyes like deep wells of static. Mouth open into perpetual whispers. Not a face, but a suggestion of one, flickering between channels of existence. And behind the entity, a radio tower, not built but grown from veins and cables, crowned in bone. Mila turned from the mirror. She was no longer in the house. She was in its memory. She stood in a makeshift recording studio, ancient and modern all at once. A young woman sat in front of a microphone, trembling. Her name tag read Sylvia, 1957. "I've seen it," Sylvia whispered, clutching headphones. "It's in its waves. It's made of meaning." A man behind the glass nodded. "Good. Let it speak through you." Mila watched as Sylvia opened her mouth, and the first true broadcast began. The signal was never meant to be heard. It was a summoning, encoded in a longing, layered in loneliness, baited with grief. It used the weak, the broken, the curious. Sylvia had been all three, and Naira had come through. Not all at once, but enough. The recording, the first whisper, had survived, copied, bootlegged, transmitted through generations, rewound and replayed. Each play brought Naira closer, until Mila snapped back to the present. She was standing in the attic now. A reel-to-reel recorder still spun. Dust hung like spores in the air. She approached it, pressed stop, and then a voice behind her said, "That's not how this ends." She turned. Jordan, but no longer broken, no longer flickering. He was whole, still, unnatural but solid, human-shaped, but something inside him vibrated. It doesn't die if you stop the tape, he said. It only dies if you finish the message. What message? Mila asked. He stepped aside. Behind him, etched into the walls, was a sentence, scrambled, reversed phonetically, buried in noise. It was Naira's true name, a word never meant for the human throat. Jordan nodded. You say it, you close it. But I'll become like you, Mila whispered. He nodded again, or worse. She took a breath, approached the wall, read the impossible word. Each syllable fractured her mind, scraping pieces off like paint. Naira et sho murder an. She convulsed. Blood trickled from her eyes, her nose, her ears. But the walls shifted. The air stilled. The radios in town shut off. The whispering house screamed. And Naira was cast out. Mila woke up in a hospital bed. No alarms, no radios. Just the beep of a heart monitor in a distant rain. Bellwether had returned to normal. Almost. The streets were repaired. The people moved like they used to. But no one mentioned the eye, or the signal, or the tower. As if the town had edited itself. Jordan was gone, officially declared missing. But Mila knew better. She felt him sometimes, in flickers of sound, in the pressure before sleep, and when she walked past the whispering house, now boarded up again, the air still vibrated, just faintly, like something trapped behind the glass of a long-buried cassette. She never turned the radio on again, but some nights, when the wind was just right, she could still hear it. A whisper, a name, a message unfinished.